have spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
So we've just arrived in Managua. We just got off our flight. Lily and Keaton are here with me. It's kind of a miracle that we arrived here because at the very last minute, we were about to get on our flight and our name was not on the list from the airline. It was the weirdest thing, and we had been cleared. There was a Nicaraguan government guy who said we were on the list and let us in, and then at the last minute we get up there and the airline was telling us we couldn't get on the plane. And luckily it was Keaton who saved the day, motioned over to the Nicaraguan government guy and said, aren't we on the list? He came up and argued with the guy, and luckily we were able to get on the plane.
He argued with the Air Mexico guy, and the guy was like, okay, I guess he looked like he overrode something in the system. I saw like there was like some red text on our names or something like that.
It was very strange.
It's very direct, it's very efficient. The voting places are very, very well staffed compared to the American system, which is stuck waiting in lines for hours upon hours just to be able to do something that takes about 3 minutes. And so people walk into the polling place, they present their identification, they're verified through the monitors, the managers here at the polling stations. They go, they cast their ballot in secret and privacy, put it in the ballot box, it's been counted. And of course, the winner of the election then leads the country. It is a very open election.
The government of Nicaragua has gone out of its way to encourage the participation of its population in the political process. They've lowered the voting age to 16. They have laws mandating that women be elected in the government and that 50% of the candidates of every party be women. They're doing everything they can to try and ensure that their people go out to vote. I mean, this is a government that is trying to advocate on behalf of the working class and the broad masses of people. And in order to do that, they have to have an electoral system that brings in the broad masses of people and encourages their participation. Look, in the United States, we have our elections on a Tuesday, not a national holiday. People line up for hours to vote before work. They line up for hours to vote after work. In the United States, there's whole regions, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, that have absolutely no say in who is elected to the U.S. Congress or who becomes president. But yet, here in Nicaragua, in a socialist country that's demonized as a quote-unquote dictatorship by the United States, we see a much bigger effort to include people in the electoral process, a much bigger level of transparency, a much bigger level of voter participation, and I mean, this is ridiculous what we're hearing in U.S. media.
I mean, it looks like free and fair elections. I mean, you present your identification, you register, and there's multiple candidates on the ballot, not just the Sandinistas. You can vote for whoever you want. You have a private space, so you have your privacy. And it seems a lot more fair to me than the United States elections, in which I've seen people lined up for hours, just waiting to vote. And a lot of the times people just give up because, people have lives to live. But here, voting is important, and they have lots of staff. They've got pretty short, quick lines, and it seems open and fair to us.
I must say, if you question U.S. elections and the integrity of the U.S. electoral process, if you question that, you get your Facebook account taken down. You get your Twitter account taken down. There's all this effort to ensure that no one's allowed to question the outcome of U.S. elections. But this election hasn't even happened yet. And the USA is already poised to put new sanctions on Nicaragua in response to these elections. They're basically threatening the people of Nicaragua. If you dare vote for a socialist leader, we are going to hit your country with economic sanctions. We're going to hurt your economy. If that's not election meddling, what is it? So we're here at the Elections Supreme Council. And this is where the preliminary results, not the official final results, but the preliminary results of the election in Nicaragua will be declared.
Esperamos contar para el día de mañana ya con la Junta ya enjutada de los votos con los resultados que tienen que ver igualmente con la elección de diputados nacionales, departamentales y al Parlamento y quedaríamos convocados para mañana a la 1 de la tarde para el segundo informe.
Massive Sandinista rally at 3 in the morning, just after the election results have started to come in. It looks like the Sandinistas have a very large lead.
Basically, in the U.S., you're called a Russian spy.
Yeah, of course. But I tell people that we're true patriots. The people of America don't benefit from these wars. You know, our country's getting poorer. Your roads are better than our roads. You know, our roads in the United States are corrupted, falling apart. We're driving down your roads, no potholes. It's ridiculous. You know, New York City, you know, Illinois, Chicago. I mean, the roads are falling apart. Our water isn't properly purified. Our government is too busy investing in tearing down other people's countries rather than building up our country. And many Americans, I think, voted the way they did in elections recently and have been angry because they are tired of this regime change meddling around the world. You know, and there are millions of working class young people in the United States who want to run the truth, don't trust the government, don't trust what it's saying, and are ready to question things, and we're here to give them answers.
It's great to see that there's youth in the U.S. that actually has it clear. You can see exactly what's going on and just going over all that media, mass media in the U.S. that's controlled by the big powers. You know exactly how it is.
Yeah, you see your people as a resource. In the United States, our government sees the population as an annoying horde that needs to be managed. They want us to go away. They want us to fade away so they can continue their project to dominate the world, getting richer. But here, you see your population as an asset. You invest in your population. You educate, you build them up, you build a productive economy. Now, we need to show people what Nicaragua is like. The United States, the slogan we've used, we say we need a government of action that will fight for working families. And I tell them, you in Nicaragua, you have a government of action that fights for working families. It's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
One of our biggest concerns is that when the President of the United States makes a statement that elections aren't free and fair here in Nicaragua, I can only think of how many states since the last election took place in the United States that they have changed the election laws, making it more difficult, especially for people of color, to vote in the United States. And yet, when I'm here and I'm talking to people, even from the opposition party, one of the things they constantly said was that any type of embargo hurts all the people here in Nicaragua, and that they were opposed to the United States suggesting embargoes against the people of Nicaragua.
I want to concentrate on the process itself. I didn't really care who was on the ballot. All I cared about was the framework and the process in which we saw to see that it was a fair, transparent election. And every step of the way here in Nicaragua, that's exactly what we got. From the registration process down to the fluidity of the voting process. We, in fact, clocked a voter who got in and out in 8 minutes and 43 seconds. And that was a long time, in fact. Could you imagine in America, which we saw in California with the California primaries? In Nicaragua, we have something that is awesome that a lot of countries need to adopt, which is where the vote is cast, it is counted. That assures a strong chain of custody. And regardless that we heard a lot of misinformation when it came to parties being jailed and not being able to run on the ballot, which was so untrue. We understand that a lot of these parties received money from NGOs and they didn't want to declare where they got their money from. We saw one of the cleanest processes here in Nicaragua. it was definitely a home run.
Here in the Plaza of the Revolution in downtown Managua, and pretty soon the president, Daniel Ortega, is going to be speaking. As you can see, behind me are members of the military, members of the Nicaraguan military, and also on this side you can see a lot of members of the Sandinista youth organizations who have gathered. There's candles that have been lit. This is the day after the election. We're all assembled here with our delegation from the Center for Political Innovation. It's quite a scene here.
Familia nicaragüense. Que viva el 45 aniversario del tránsito a la inmortalidad del comandante Carlos Fonseca Amador. Sandino vive. Que viva Nicaragua bendita. La soberanía ni se vende ni se rinde. La soberanía ni se vende ni se rinde. Patria libre.
Saw President Daniel Ortega give a fiery speech condemning the imperialists, condemning foreign intervention, and advocating for the people of Nicaragua to have their self-determination and let their election results be respected by the international community. Before in my life, I didn't really know what I was fighting for. I didn't know what I was living for. And now with the Center for Political Innovation, I have hope. I have meaning. I know I'm fighting to build a better tomorrow. Being in this socialist country, being in Nicaragua, has changed my perspective entirely. The cancel culture, the focusing on cultural issues, the hating your country is nothing like what the Sandinistas are doing. The Sandinistas love their country, the Sandinistas love their people, and the Sandinistas are fighting for a better tomorrow. I hope that we can build something like what they have here in Nicaragua, a government of action that fights for working families, that cares for its people, that views the population as an asset and not a horde to be controlled.
Man, it was amazing. It was an experience that it's impossible to describe unless you were there. When we saw on the screens and we could hear from outside of the plaza that President Ortega was on his way, it was almost there, as people were cheering from outside the plaza, and you see him and you see his head appear from around the corner of one of the monuments. I'll tell you what, my eyes started tearing up because I was realizing that I was in the presence of someone who is leading their country into a better future, who's on the real fight against imperialism, who's on the real fight to build socialism. And it's such an awe-inspiring experience. There's no way to really understand what that felt like. You know, my old life was good, it was okay, but my new life is better than I could have ever imagined. And my new life is better than it would have been anywhere else or with any other group. How many people can can go from being in a small town in Illinois, just graduating high school, to being on international trips to monitor elections and to get a photograph and touch the hand of the president of a socialist country. Not many people can say that, but I can, because I threw my lot in with the Center for Political Innovation, and it was the best decision I've made. I saw real communists, I saw real socialists, I saw socialists that took power, socialists that had power in the government, and with supporting their people and building up their people, were able to maintain that power. And that's not something we have in the US. You should have seen it. The Youth League was there with their bandanas of the FSLN, and they were waving back and forth and jumping and clapping, and it was just an ecstatic kind of climate and environment to be in. And it was mind-blowing, and I realized that this is what we need. This is the kind of movement we need if we want to be successful in American politics and building American socialism. I want this to be the reality of the U.S. as well. We want to be able to build enough popularity and build enough mass support to be able to end imperialism and to take the sanctions off Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela, so that these rallies and these demonstrations here in Nicaragua can be 5 times as big, and the life can improve everywhere for all people, and that can only be done if communists in the U.S. are able to take political and popular power.
He gave a message of hope, building to a better tomorrow, not giving up, not surrendering, not purging themselves of problematic elements. I believe we saw the city-building tendency in the Sandinistas and President Daniel Ortega. These people are professional revolutionaries, not some punk rock hipsters in New York City or Seattle, but real revolutionaries. They wore suits, they sang, danced, clapped, chanted in coordination. When I came to Nicaragua, I knew they were Christian, and I knew they were likely socially conservative. Myself being a transgender individual, I won't deny, I was a little concerned, but interacting with these people, I have found them to be the most respectful, kind, and courteous people I've ever met. They showed me absolute respect. They showed me no forms of discrimination and all forms of accommodation. The US imperialists using the LGBT movement to justify their wars in Libya, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Iran, and all the anti-imperialist countries sickens me, as it should sicken everybody.
The Sandinistas were able to keep themselves in power by rebuilding the roads and by building $100 million hospitals. I mean, this is the way the Sandinistas have stayed in power. I've seen the elections firsthand. I can attest to how legitimate they are. And let me tell you what, because of how the Sandinistas act towards the broad masses of people and how they maintain the economy and control it to ensure that the market isn't allowed to run rampant and destroy people's lives, is the reason the Sandinistas have been reelected in 2021.
I formed the Center for Political Innovation after visiting socialist countries and anti-imperialist states like Venezuela, Iran, and I saw for myself what real socialist movements are about. And they are not pessimistic, they are optimistic. They are not about tearing people down, they're about building people up. They're about loving their communities, loving their countries, trying to use popular power to mobilize, to build, to overcome the irrationality of profits in command and markets. The Center for Political Innovation is different than what you can call the synthetic left in the United States. If you look at the demonstrations of leftism we see in the United States, they look very different than the demonstration we saw here tonight. These are people who are full of hope. These are people who are full of love and optimism, full of pride in their heritage and in their country, full of a desire to seize the means of production and mobilize the economy to serve the people, to get us up to that higher stage with so much wealth and abundance that we could eventually see the fading away of the state itself. That's the ultimate goal, the highest stage of communism. This is a totally different thing. Totally different thing than what we see in the United States. And the reason I'm so hated on social media, the reason there's been such a huge campaign to call me a fascist and demonize me, is because I understand what real socialism is like. And now I've not only been promoting that understanding on my YouTube broadcasts and in the books I've written, but we're building the Center for Political Innovation and the John Brown Volunteers and Students and Youth for a New America. And part of what we're doing is we're going to the countries where working people have taken power. And in those countries, we are teaching young people what socialism is really about. This was our first big international delegation as the Center for Political Innovation. I would say it has been a huge success.